Hello and welcome my Varieties students to a new lecture on the language of press. We are still dwelling on popular newspaper. Last time we talked about the grammatical aspects of popular newspapers. We investigated the patterns of sentences and sentence structure as well as clauses, and we saw that most of the aspects actually work toward achieving simplicity and clarity of style. We looked at the different noun phrases, verb phrases, also in terms of the tense that is mostly consumed in popular newspapers, and adjectival phrases, those that are compound and those that are outlandish. And we saw that basically popular newspapers, they are quite informal in terms of the language use, the contractions. They follow this kind of fashion or style of writing in order to reach the audience, a large number of audience. And because this type of style seems closer to the audience, and it really creates a kind of affinity and intimacy with them. For today, we're going to dive into the sea of vocabulary, and we will look at the different aspects of vocabulary. All right, so let's jump to the outline. So in this part, we're going to deal with vocabulary in terms of word formation, compounds and neologisms, colloquialism, characteristic vocabulary, figures of rhetoric and idioms, emphatic vocabulary, biased and unbiased vocabulary, core vocabulary, acronyms and abbreviations. So it's going to be a rich session all about vocabulary. So let's get started. To start with word formation, popular newspapers are fond of inventiveness and deviant uses of words and phrases. Maybe we saw this before with the adjectival phrases. You remember? Yeah, you got it wrong remarks, or hoped for decision. Yes, okay, so these are all word formations. Compounds take the lion's share in the total percentage of neologisms, new words followed by colloquialism. Remember that neologism, it means the makeup of new words, or the inventiveness of new words. So first of all, you may pose this question: what are compounds? A compound is a combination of two or more words put together, usually hyphenated, to give one word. Popular newspapers favor odd, unusual formations of compounds, especially the so-called outlandish adjectives and adjectival noun phrases. For example, this is a fast arriving information. Okay, now these are all considered outlandish adjectives. They are not really used in common English, and they are basically exclusively used in this type of text. Hoped for decisions. Okay, another adjectival noun phrases: 4-day stay, space probe, asbestos dust pearl. Okay, so these are adjectival noun phrases because they are made of nouns. 4 is a noun, day is a noun, space is a noun, asbestos, dust are all nouns. Okay, so remember that for the first ones, they are compounds of verbs and nouns, or prepositions like hoped for, but in adjectival noun phrases, they are made of pure nouns. The function of these outlandish formations and compounds of adjectives is to catch the reader's attention, drag and involve him or her into the reading material, and to some extent to contribute to the English language vocab in general as well. Another remarkable feature of popular newspaper is the use of colloquialism. Colloquialisms is a superordinate term including colloquial words and expressions and other informal features which are quite popular in this type of newspaper. Um, you know, we have many forms of colloquialism. For example, the use of contractions like will not, won't, shall not, shan't, is not, isn't. Okay, so usually in formal text we don't find this kind of use of colloquialism, but this is quite common in popular newspaper. An interesting feature of American popular newspapers is the use of the comprehensive contraction AIM, which is this is actually a very colloquial kind of form, and which proves the informality of this type of newspaper. Okay, so aimed, maybe for those who don't know, it stands for am not, or is not, are not, has not, or have not. This is a comprehensive contraction that stands for everything. Contracted verb forms like these are characteristic of everyday language, so they are closer to readers. Another form of colloquialism is the use of phrasal verbs. They are features of informal language. They are extremely frequent in popular newspapers because the public is well acquainted with them. Okay, so instead of using uncommon words or words that might seem quite complicated or unfamiliar to the public, so you would use words that you are 100% sure that they understand it. So usually they bank on the use of phrasal verbs. Again, they reflect the informal style of this kind of newspaper and the insistence on approaching the reader by all means. If we are to think about the stylistic functions behind using colloquialisms, in fact, colloquialisms achieve two major stylistic functions. First of all, to get closer and more intimate to readers and therefore establish a better communication with them. Colloquial language is used by people most of the time, so reading a language with which readers have a great deal in common achieve more affinity, intimacy, and popularity than a highly standardized, fancy, sophisticated language. Another interesting aspect found in popular newspaper is the characteristic vocabulary. What are characteristic vocabulary? Popular newspapers tend to use special words which are not used in other contexts. These words are not necessarily colloquial or formal. Here are some examples. Like the special word is raw, okay, which is the equivalent of dispute, okay. Now these are some of the words that are found in the example in the text you have in your core textbook. Okay, so you find this word in the leading article. Raw would always be used instead of dispute. Hetman, it means a hired assassin. Okay, this word is found in left-handed side article. I know it's hard to read the articles because of the bad, quality of the Xerox, and it's not clear. I know it, but I don't know. Just try your best, or just observe these information because they are important. Probe, investigation, left-handed side article, and the quiz for inquire, left-handed side article. What do you notice in these words? You notice that in the special words they are made of they are smaller words, and they do not take so much space as the other equivalent words, like for example probe instead of investigation. You look how investigation, how big is the word, so why to use this word when we have this problem of spacing and we are working for brevity. So journalists would always prefer to use smaller words, words that do not take so many space or so much space in the article or in the newspaper in general. So other examples: to wed, the equivalent is to marry, or pact, treaty, trek, journey, bid, attempt, ban, prohibit, read, communist. So such characteristic vocabulary is used primarily to save space, especially in headlines. It can be easily noted that the words on the left are shorter than their equivalents on the right, in the examples cited above. As for rhetorical figures and idioms, figures of rhetoric such as metaphor, irony, personification, simile are used for a variety of effects like sarcasm, exaggeration, insinuation, despise, and so forth. They are used to beautify language and style. Now, the book actually doesn't provide any kind of examples, but generally they are used and they are fundamental aspects of figurative language, and basically it is used to beautify language and style, to please the audience and the interest of the readers. Okay, that's it. So another extremely important aspect of journalistic writing in general and popular newspaper writing in particular is the use of emphatic vocabulary to assert the truthfulness and credibility of information and news. Popular newspapers resort to lexical devices of emphasis. Words like, for example, words of exaggeration, doubling and tripling of the number of people dead or affected by a disaster, a policy, or a contagion illness, or a famine. For example, thousands of people died in the earthquake last night. Now this is a shocking headline, thousands of people. Now this gives the impression that the number of deaths is 3, 5, or possibly 15,000 or 20,000, whereas the actual number could be 1 or 2,000 only. Such exaggeration serves to emphasize that a huge number of people died. They like it, even like when you watch the TV news broadcasts, they love it to make, shocking news, and they would double the numbers and they would make dramatic news. Sometimes there is nothing, but they like to flare the news and to make it really on fire. The use of the unmodified plural words can suggest emphatic exaggeration as well. A good example is provided in the first paragraph of the leading article of Figure 1. Homeless families have been moved. Families is used with a general, unspecified, or unspecific reference. No specific figure is given, which naturally implies that those families are many. Intensifiers. Intensifying words are also considered emphatic vocabulary. Words such as too, many, very, exceedingly, a lot, a great deal, many, and much, they are all emphasizers of amount, number, quantity. size, range, level, they have an emphatic power by themselves. Other words of emphasis: certainly, absolutely, surely, definitely, clearly, and evidently. They are also quite used, and they have a very powerful impact on the news. One of the most important notions in journalistic writing is biased and unbiased vocabulary. Biased attitudes is personal and subjective, to be either with or against someone or something. You know that the journalism in general, they tend to be quite neutral. They are not biased. You shouldn't show your inclination or your orientation, or you shouldn't be biased as when you report news and show who you stand with. Um, so biased attitude is personal and subjective, to be either with or against someone or something. Now, as a journalist, when you hate someone, you would write about them, and you would, maybe uh, show your personal feelings on paper. Now, this shouldn't happen, but in, of course, popular newspaper writing, this is quite encouraged, and they would always do it. So, unbiased attitude in an impersonal and objective one, aiming to be neutral, neither with nor against something or someone. So, uh, press in general should always be biased and biased. Alright, so compare the following examples. Two diplomats were requested to leave the country. Okay, so two diplomats were requested to leave the country. Now, this kind of use of wording is quite biased with, okay, means that you have a kind of sympathy and affinity to the diplomats, and so when you reported the news about them, so you used very euphemistic wording, okay, like were requested to leave the country. Let's move to the second example. Two diplomats were expelled yesterday. Okay, the word here expelled is quite striking. Okay, so two diplomats were expelled. This is still, this seems to be unbiased. Okay, they were expelled, that's it. Two diplomats were ordered to leave the country. This is also unbiased, and this is very polite form, and I think this is better than this construction is better than sentence number 2. I didn't like it. I thought this was quite biased against. Two diplomats were expelled, biased against, but according to the book, this is unbiased. Two diplomats were ordered to leave the country. This is also unbiased. This is very objective and neutral. Look at this. Two spying diplomats were kicked out. You see now here the wording. Two spying diplomats were kicked out. Obviously, this is biased against. Alright. Two spies were booted or given the boot. This is completely biased against. Okay, so this number 5 is more biased against than even number 4 because of the slang word that is exploited here. Using acronyms and abbreviations are very common in English popular newspapers. Of course, for the sake of brevity and saving space. An acronym is the reduction of a term to the initials of each of its words, as the examples cited below. For example, the acronyms MP They stand for member of parliament. You see, we have opted the two first letters of the words. M and P, member of parliament. UN, United Nations. UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. So acronyms are widely used as for the sake of brevity and saving space. Abbreviations, on the other hand, mean the use of shortened forms of a word. For example, DIPT stands for department, ENG stands for English, UNI stands for university. Remember that these are not acronyms, these are abbreviations, because we have just a shorted form of the word, not the initial, but the shorted, not the initial letters, but the shorted forms of a word. Again, they are used for brevity and saving space. The last aspect that, or the last level of stylistic analysis we talk about today is phonology. Phonology, of course, is the study of sounds. Phonological features play an important aesthetic role, especially as when it comes to headlines and especially main headlines. These features are incorporated in some uses of alliteration as well, like agreement of sounds of consecutive words, as T in Too Tough Talk Tonight. Okay, you see, this is alliteration and it's quite commonly used in newspaper writing. So T here is used consecutively in the following sentence: Too tough talk tonight. And by using consonants, that is to say concord of the last sound of consecutive words, for example, bad, sad, mad, mood. Okay, so bad, sad, bad, mood. Now this is also an example of consonants. They are used, they make the language rhythmic and add more zest and aesthetic flavor to articles, and also it pleases as well as attracts readers.